Hi, I'm Amanda Morgan, and this is Not Just Cute, the podcast, where we discuss all kinds of topics to help bridge the gap that exists between what we know and what we do in early childhood education. We're starting conversations with academics, authors, decision makers, educators, and parents so that together we can improve the quality of early childhood education, while at the same time protecting and respecting the childhood experience. Before we begin, a quick heads up that the Why We Play letters will be on sale through the end of August. These letters will help you jumpstart important conversations in your learning community about the importance and power of play in your early childhood setting. People don't value what they don't understand. If you want to help parents and colleagues understand the value of play, the Why We Play letters were created just for you, and this is the perfect time to get them all lined up for the new school year. Learn more and grab a free sample letter at notjustcute.com/whyweplay. If you've been listening to these podcasts for a while, then today's guest is no stranger to you. And even if you haven't, the odds are good that you've been forwarded one of her many articles published by the Huffington Post, or maybe you've read one of her many books, such as What If Everybody Understood Child Development, or you might have seen her recently at a conference. That's right, I'm talking about my friend 𝐅𝐫𝐞𝐞. We had a great conversation recently about how and why we should get parents on board with play-based, developmentally appropriate education. You can find show notes for this episode at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 45. I'm excited for you to hear this important conversation with 𝐅𝐫𝐞𝐞. Whether she's sharing her expertise with Nike, Sesame Street, the CDC, or a room full of educators, Ray always brings an abundance of passion and a wealth of experience. This episode is no exception. Let's jump in. Hi, Ray. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Amanda. I always enjoy talking with you.
I always enjoy it as well. So you and I spend a lot of time training educators, but it's become clear, I know for both of us, that educators are not the only audience that needs to hear more about how children really learn, and that parents are really a big variable there, and that they can either be part of the pressure that's pushing some of those best practices out, or they can be some of the biggest advocates that are keeping respectful practices in. So what do you think makes that difference?
I like that term, respectful practices. That really works. I'm going to borrow it, Amanda. Well, the difference, I don't know. You and I know that parents are getting a lot of misinformation these days, and the earlier is better thing is a big belief in their minds, and they have to give their kids a head start and leg up and all of that. Mm-hmm. And so that's why so many play-oriented early childhood programs have, either disappeared or turned toward academics because the parents were asking for it. I think that there are fewer of the other kind of parent who know the value of play and the value of these other practices that have been part of early childhood education for a long time, until suddenly people started paying attention to us and wanting things to be changed, right? Mm-hmm. So, I've been telling the early childhood professionals for a long time, for years, that we have to help educate the parents. And if you could help me think of a different word than educate, because it makes it sound, I don't want to sound condescending. Right. It makes it sound, as though I think they have to be educated. I just think that they need to be reassured. Mm-hmm. They need to feel empowered.
Ooh,
and they need to be able to tell what information is good and what is just wrong. So, yeah.
Well, that's so true, because I really think, that parents you have to start from that base point of believing that the vast majority of parents just really want what's best for their children, right? We have to make some of those exceptions for some of those outlying circumstances, but they want what's best. It's just a matter of helping them to understand what is best for their children, and like you said, empowering them with the right information. That I really have to believe that when good people get with good information, they will make good choices, right? And that we have to put our parents in those kinds of situations. And it's interesting that I really feel like when parents do have that good information, they are some of the strongest advocates for play-based, respectful practices, because they understand what it offers for their children.
Exactly. We need to get them on our side because there is strength in numbers, and,
Definitely.
They can greatly contribute to our numbers. And, we all have those numbers, have greater voting power. And if there are more of us speaking up, it makes a really big difference. And like you say, the parents who, the whole empowerment piece. I remember several years ago, a mom who was an early childhood professional and knew child development came up to me and she said, God, I am just facing so much pressure from the community to enroll my daughter in the local competitive soccer program. And I said, how old is your daughter? And she said 2.5.
Oh my goodness.
So, we're going to forget about the fact that foot-eye coordination isn't fully developed till 9 or 10, and just get them out there and expect them to be, David Beckham. So she knew she did have the correct information, but it was challenging for her to resist all that pressure and opposition from other parents. So, we have to have more parents who know and understand so that the ones who are holding out on the whole earlier is better thing, don't feel so bad.
And it is difficult. It's overwhelming as a parent. I know even having the education in child development, I feel often as a parent that there are like two parts of my brain that argue with each other sometimes, because that part of the brain that's in the parenting world, it does get very noisy and you feel all this pressure and a lot of different and mixed messages. And it's like the professional part of my brain had to, sit the other half down and have a chat oftentimes, because there's a lot of pressure and noise really that makes you question yourself and question, like you said, this parent knew in her gut, but then there are all these other factors that make them question. And I wonder, you talked about a lot of programs maybe that begin play-based and begin to shift towards a more academic, for lack of a better word, focus. And it's because of this pressure. Sometimes it's this pressure from parents. And I think it's interesting because it's hard, I think, and we've talked about this before, as educators, it's hard to think of the work that we do from a marketing standpoint, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But in a sense, when you talk about programs shifting that way, it really is a matter of, to me, I feel like they're trying to serve their clients, right? They're trying to serve their clientele, and it's kind of a shift where really if we could take the best from marketing standpoint, that good marketing teaches the customer and informs them of why what they're offering, how it's going to serve them, and how it's going to, if you look at Apple or any of these other really well marketed programs, right? Nobody woke up one day and said, I wish that I had this device I could carry around and do all these things, right? There's marketing that teaches, here's why, and here's how your life will benefit, and here's how we can help you. And I sometimes wonder if education and respectful practices and child development, all of those things, if we could take the best from the marketing world and better educate. I mean, that's really what good marketing does, is educate how we can help you and how this is best going to serve you. And if we could be maybe a little more bold in helping people understand why what we do matters and how it will serve them and their children.
You're absolutely right, because so many times the parents are out there interviewing at preschools and early learning centers, and if they find out it's mostly play, they move on. And then of course that center has to worry about lack of enrollment and survival. They're in survival mode, so it's a tough choice for them. So maybe if they had the messaging, because don't you think a lot of early childhood professionals are doing what they do instinctively, and they don't necessarily have the marketing messages. They don't have, the words to convince people.
Right. As educators, that's not the background, right? Marketing
Right.
isn't part of the background, but many of these schools are a business. There are schools that literally are functioning as a business, some of these early childhood programs, or that simply based on enrollment are looked at that way. So there needs to be someone somewhere on that team that understands how to get that messaging right. And whether teachers have to do it personally or whether they just need to be involved in that. I think either way, they need to have a voice in there so that they can at least be communicating. Teachers need to be communicating what philosophically, here's what I know, here's what I do, here's why it matters. And maybe ideally there is someone else on that team that can take that information and put it into the marketing type of thing, or maybe other resources that they can use to help them get that message to parents. But I think educators at least need to be able to be comfortable conversing about those philosophical foundations and why they matter and what it means to children and families.
Yeah. If they feel strongly, if they feel passionately about it, I think it, comes more easily. There was one director who told me that she, wanted what you call the respectful practices, but her teachers, and it's funny because she was in a position of power, her teachers were succumbing to what the parents were demanding, which was the sit-down academics. And she was just hugely frustrated by that. So in her case, she needed to get the message across to her teachers. It's a complex issue. Yeah. And, like you say, the vast majority of parents want the best for their children. And as I often say, there's no easier group of people to scare, to frighten than parents, right?
That's the other side of it.
Yes. So, when somebody says you're not enrolling your child in French and gymnastics and soccer and, whatever, all these things, then you start to think, oh my gosh, I'm failing my child. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a matter of education. Mm-hmm. And we're fighting traditional media and we're fighting social media. I mean, when I think about traditional media, and this is an old example, but I'm old. It was Rob Reiner, who many years ago, a couple of decades ago, I don't know, did that whole something child thing. And it was all built around the science that had just come out about mm-hmm. the brain development in the first 3 years of life.
I think it was in the 90s. This is sounding familiar.
Thank you. Because I don't know, time just runs all together in my head. So what the media was reporting was how important the first 3 years of life. It's just sound bites. Oh my gosh, the first 3 years of life, all this brain development and these, neurons, everything's taking place in the first 3 years of life. And it scared parents mm-hmm. to death because that's all they were getting with the sound bites. They had no idea that enrichment didn't involve, bright, shiny objects and fancy gadgets and gizmos. Mm-hmm. Enrichment involves just simply paying attention to your child, yeah.
And it was well intended. I think oftentimes some
absolutely.
of this messaging is really well intended, trying to get people to care about early childhood development, right? And in the process, like you said, oftentimes it gets skewed to
yes.
To whether it's to garner more clicks or eyeballs or to get people onto their side to what they and justify the means. Maybe some people would think that at least it gets support for early childhood, but in the process, like you said, created all of this anxiety where instead of focusing on the fact that early childhood development, that period is so powerful, mm-hmm. instead it became this anxiety that it's slipping through your fingers. It's you've got to be faster, yeah. You've got to be sooner, and this is good. You're going to miss it.
Parents were buying the flashcards then,
mm-hmm.
and parents were buying infant lapware,
mm-hmm.
the whole belief that better learning happens with technology. It was all, yeah. And then, of course, it gets further skewed on social media, doesn't it? I mean,
it's a whole new element, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah,
yes, it is.
I am trying to remember where I read this, but someone talking about, so it's not original to me, but pointing out that as parents, that when any of us, anyone listening, any adult was a child, their parent maybe felt pressure from the other parents in the neighborhood or in their family. But now you can be sitting, across the country or across the world and comparing yourself to every single perfect image of any parent anywhere that they choose to share and curate, right? It creates a different level of comparison and anxiety.
Oh, so much anxiety. There's just so much anxiety. And, when I tell my audiences, my early childhood audiences, that we have to, it's just as important to educate the parents as it is to educate the children, or maybe I should say inform the parents. I can feel the energy in the room change. I can feel the resistance because, of course, they already have enough to do, right? I mean, I can't even imagine what's involved every single day anymore in their work. And when I tell them that, they feel like, oh, sure, just pile on one more thing that we have to do. But it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be so challenging. I mean, if you're already sending out an email or a newsletter, or you've got one of those apps, it's easy to include just a little bit of information about respectful practices, maybe about the value of play, or how the research shows that homework is pointless before elementary school or during elementary school. So it really doesn't have to be so challenging. Of course, you've created parent letters. I've created parent letters, and I've now created a membership program for parents. I felt so bad for the early childhood professionals that I decided to take the bull by the horn, as it were, and horns, and so I created this program, which just like a 10-minute video every month with a PDF with the transcript and access to a private Facebook page where I tackle one of these many myths. When I talk about, the need for homework, or earlier is better, or play is not a productive use of time, or sitting equals learning, those are all the myths that I'm trying to debunk. So I'm debunking one a month in these little videos. And to make it easier for parents, for early childhood professionals, I've got a licensing plan where they can, sign up for the year, and they can distribute it to their parents, as many families as they have. It doesn't matter. So, I wanted to make it easier for them to help inform the parents.
And I think that's key because, like you said, for many of these educators, they don't have the time. First of all, they're already asked to do so many things. And that was, part of my thinking as well in creating some of these parent resources, that, to have it already done for them. Yep. And also for many of them, it's just not where they feel comfortable. That this isn't what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about being in the classroom, being with the children. And so kind of helping out with that to say, like you have done, let me prepare this for you. This thing that you're dreading doing, let me just hand it to you. Right. And I think in addition to that, it can be really simple for educators, like you said, if they're already doing a parent communication piece in those many different forms, is simply adding maybe one sentence. I think as educators, we're really good at telling about what we're doing. Here's what we did in class today. Here's what's going on this month. And if we can just get in the habit of adding one or two more sentences that say why. So if we can catch ourselves as we are explaining what we're doing and put some effort into explaining why we're doing that. And like you said, just one little sentence that explains, we did this, this, and this, and here's why we did it, because it enhances creativity. We know that will lead to, better outcomes, more innovation, better outcomes across the board for young children. Just little quick things. Here's why we do it that way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's helpful to once in a while throw in a source, the name of, according to early childhood expert, so-and-so, because I suspect that the early childhood professionals have the same issue that many moms, well, I think every mom faces, right? When you say something to your children, it goes in one ear and out the other.
Who said so, right?
If they hear it from an outside source, suddenly it's valid, right? Suddenly they pay attention. They're all ears. And I think that it's the same thing. My theory is that it's because mom has an ulterior motive. If you're talking about how important it is to do well in school, it's because you want your child to do well in school. If an early childhood director is talking about, how important play is, it's because she wants, you to buy into her program. So I think having that outside voice helps.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also, kind of circles back to that whole feeling as parents feeling very overwhelmed. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of misinformation. Like you said, the source of the problem is also some of the source of the resistance, because you have a lot of people who are feeling overwhelmed or who are feeling like they're already getting so much information that is not from a really reputable source. And so for good reasons, I'm glad to see that we have some people who will be more resistant until you can say, here's where this information comes from. Here's why this is a valid source.
Yeah.
I remember going to a school to speak. They had a parent group for one of the sessions. And there was a parent who was very skeptical at first. Even before I got there, I got an email saying, we have a parent who just wants to know, some of your background and what some of these things. And the director was very apologetic. And I said, I welcome it. I think that's wonderful. That's a sign of a parent who's being very careful about which information they're going to listen to. And so I was able to share,
Right.
Here's my education background. Here are the resources I'm going to use. And thank you for asking, because,
Oh, that's great.
Because you should be that careful. You should want to know, where is this information coming from? And was able to, that same parent found me after the presentation. We had a great conversation, and she was so grateful, like you said, to have information that was presented along with sources, because I would talk about, here's based on this study, based on this
Right.
resource. And she came from an academic background and was just really grateful to have not just, to be bombarded with information, but to say, here's the source, here's
Right.
why we believe this, here's why we use this practice, here's why this matters for you and your child. And I think parents are really receptive to that. When we can give them that kind of solid information, and like you said, cite those sources and share that with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's and never in the history of parenting has there been so much information available, right?
True.
I mean, it's just crazy. You don't know what's real and what isn't, and they don't have time to sort through it all. And unless, they're in this field, or I don't know what other field might involve child development, but they haven't studied child development, and they don't have time or really the motivation to be following the research. So it's up to us to provide it to them. It's up to early childhood professionals to provide it to them in bite-sized pieces. I mean, that's why I kept the videos to 10 minutes and under. It's just, there is definitely the pros and the cons of this being the information age.
That's so true. Well, Ray, I appreciate you sharing those insights and sharing this resource for teachers and for parents to be able to create really a productive partnership, because together we really just all want what's best for our children and for our future, right? And so I really appreciate you being able to share those resources and be able to share these insights, so that all of us within, I think, in each community, we have a responsibility to that educational community to create these kinds of conversations and to keep them going, and to support parents, and ultimately our main goal, right, to support and protect and encourage children and childhood as well. So thank you for being a part of that.
Well, thank you. I mean, yes, we need to, by doing this, by taking the time to inform the parents, we're helping ourselves, because we're not being forced to do things that we know aren't respectful practices. We're, of course, helping the children. We're helping the parents, and we're helping the profession. So it really is important. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you. Thanks again for listening to Not Just Cute, the podcast. You can find show notes at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 45. You'll also find links to Ray's site and her parent education program, along with other interesting tidbits addressed in this episode. Show notes also include a link to the Why We Play letters, so you can check those out and download the free sample letter. I'm Amanda Morgan. You can read more on my blog and sign up for the Not Just Cute newsletter at notjustcute.com. And follow me on Facebook. That's facebook.com/notjustcute. I'm also fumbling my way through Instagram, so follow me there at Amanda_notjustcute. Thanks for listening today, and as always, thank you for standing up for children and for childhood.